Hello everyone and welcome to How-FixIT. If you need to disassemble or repair your DJI RC 2 remote controller, this complete teardown guide will show you how to access, remove, and replace the major internal components step by step. In this video, I'll show you how to completely disassemble the remote controller, including the internal batteries, cooling fan, main board, joystick and control stick modules, antennas, buttons, control dials, and other internal components. I'll also show you how to reassemble the remote controller correctly after the repair. For this repair, you will need a precision screwdriver set. You will also need plastic pry tools to open the controller housing safely and a pair of tweezers. I've included links to the tools and replacement parts in the video description below. I also recommend using a magnetic mat to organize all screws and small parts during the repair. The DJI RC 2 uses many small screws of different sizes, and keeping each screw in the correct location will make reassembly much easier. A magnetic mat also helps keep small metal parts in place and reduces the risk of losing screws or installing them in the wrong locations. So, let's get started. Before you begin disassembling the controller, remove both control sticks. If they are stored in the rear storage area, remove them from the storage slots. Next, remove the two screws from the bottom of the remote controller. The screws are located in the recessed accessory mounting area. Use the 1.0mm Phillips screwdriver to remove these two screws. The next two screws are hidden behind the control stick storage slot. Using a plastic spudger or tweezers, carefully remove the rubber stick holder. This part is held in place with double-sided adhesive. If necessary, you can warm the area slightly with a hair dryer to soften the adhesive and make removal easier. Remove the two hidden screws underneath using a 1.5mm hex screwdriver. After removing the screws, you can begin opening the controller housing. I recommend creating the first gap at the bottom of the controller near the USB-C charging port. Insert a thin plastic pry tool into the gap and carefully release the plastic clips around the perimeter. Work slowly around the edges of the controller. Do not force the housing apart, as this may damage the plastic clips or the internal cable connecting the rear cover. Once the housing clips are released, do not separate the two halves completely. First, carefully disconnect the rear cover cable from the main board. Once the cable is disconnected, you can safely separate the controller housing. The rear cover assembly contains the Gimbal Dial, camera control dial, and the C1 and C2 buttons. Set the rear cover aside and continue working with the front housing. The DJI RC 2 uses two internal 18650 lithium-ion battery cells. To remove them, first disconnect both battery connectors from the main board. I recommend using a plastic tool around the battery connectors. If you use metal tweezers, be careful not to bridge the contacts, as this could cause a short circuit. After removing the batteries, we can move on to the cooling fan assembly. Remove the 6 screws securing the fan assembly using a 2.5mm Phillips screwdriver. The fan cable uses very thin wires, so never pull directly on the wires when disconnecting it. Use tweezers to carefully disconnect the fan connector by gripping the connector itself. Now you can remove the cooling fan assembly. The cooling fan may need to be replaced if it stops spinning, works intermittently, or makes unusual grinding, rattling, or buzzing noises. If the remote controller becomes unusually hot and the cooling fan is not running properly, the fan may also be the cause. Before replacing it, check the fan for dust or debris that could prevent it from spinning freely. If the fan is damaged or no longer operates correctly, replace the cooling fan assembly. I've included a link to a replacement fan in the video description below. Carefully use a plastic tool to remove the metal heat spreading plate. There is thermal paste between the metal plate and the main board, so do not wipe it off. You can reuse the thermal paste if it is still in good condition. If the thermal paste is dry, dirty, or damaged, apply fresh thermal compound during reassembly. Disconnect all cables and antennas from the main board. The main board may need to be replaced if the remote controller does not power on even after the battery and charging system have been checked, or if the board has visible water damage, corrosion, burned components, damaged connectors, or other physical damage. Mainboard failure can also cause repeated system problems, unstable operation, unexpected shutdowns, or multiple functions of the controller to stop working at the same time. If the fault has been traced to the main board and component level repair is not practical, replacing the complete main board may be the best solution. I've included a link to a replacement main board in the video description below. The micro SD card slot and USB-C charging port are soldered directly to the main board. If the controller has charging problems caused by a damaged or loose USB-C port, replacing the port requires micro-soldering equipment and experience. This is not a simple plug-in replacement, so if you are not comfortable with board-level soldering, I recommend having the USB-C port repaired by an experienced technician. Remove the 4 screws securing the joystick module, disconnect the cable, and remove the module from the case. The joystick module may need to be replaced if a control stick has drift, does not return correctly to the center, moves unevenly, feels loose or mechanically damaged, or no longer responds properly to movement. Joystick problems can also appear after a drop or impact if the internal mechanism, sensor, or stick shaft has been damaged. I've included a link to a replacement joystick module in the video description below. After replacing a joystick module, make sure to calibrate the control sticks in DJI Fly before using the controller. The right module is disassembled in a similar way. Unscrew 4 screws and disconnect the cable from the board. The left and right joystick modules are different, so make sure you keep track of which module belongs to each side. If you are replacing a joystick module, order the correct replacement specifically for the left or right side. Unscrew the 2 screws and remove the antenna module. To remove the camera button, also known as the focus and shutter button, disconnect the button cable and remove the 2 screws securing the button assembly to the controller housing. The button mechanism is mounted on a separate circuit board. If the button no longer responds when pressed, the switch or circuit board may be faulty and the board may need to be replaced. However, if the button still works but feels stiff, sticks, or is difficult to press, the problem may be related to the button spring. I'll show you how to remove and replace the spring in the button mechanism a little later. To remove the record button, disconnect the button cable and remove the 2 screws securing the button assembly to the controller housing. The button mechanism is mounted on a separate circuit board. If the record button no longer responds when pressed, the switch or circuit board may be faulty and the board may need to be replaced. However, if the button still works but feels stiff, sticks, or is difficult to press, the problem may be related to the button spring. I'll show you how to remove and replace the spring in the button mechanism a little later. Remove the 2 screws securing the speaker to the controller housing, then disconnect the speaker cable. Remove the 4 screws securing the power and control board to the controller housing. This power and control board handles several of the controller's main controls, including the power button, flight pause and RTH button, and flight mode switch. The board also contains the built-in buzzer and is connected to the controller's GPS system. This board may need to be replaced if these buttons or the flight mode switch stop working, if the buzzer fails, or if the board has visible damage, corrosion, damaged connectors, or other electronic faults. If you are troubleshooting GPS-related problems, also inspect this board and the GPS cable for damage or loose connections before replacing the board. Now, I'll show you how to remove and replace the antenna and the spring mechanism for the top buttons. To remove the antenna, squeeze the plastic retaining clips and carefully push the antenna through the controller housing. To install the antenna, align it with the opening and push it into the controller housing until the retaining clips snap securely into place. To access the spring mechanisms of the camera button and record button, press the plastic retaining latch to release the button from the housing. Once the button is removed, you can clean the mechanism or replace the spring if it is bent, deformed, or no longer provides proper button tension. Two antennas are still attached to the front housing. If your replacement housing does not include them, heat the adhesive, carefully remove the antennas, and transfer them to the new housing. If your screen is cracked, damaged, or otherwise defective and needs to be replaced, watch my separate screen replacement guide. In that video, I'll show you how to properly remove the display assembly, install the replacement screen, and reassemble the controller. Let's move on to the rear housing. This is where the gimbal dial, camera control dial, and the C1 and C2 buttons are located. All 4 controls are connected together by wires as a single assembly. If you need to replace only one of these controls, soldering will be required, so you will need a soldering iron and some soldering experience. However, you can also replace the entire control assembly without separating the individual components. To remove the complete assembly, unscrew the 8 screws securing the buttons and dials to the rear housing. Now you can remove and replace the entire control assembly. At this point, we have completely disassembled the DJI RC 2 remote controller. If your goal is to replace the controller housing, now is the time to transfer the required components to the replacement housing. Before starting the reassembly, I recommend taking a short break and returning with a clear focus. Then, we'll begin putting the controller back together. Now, let's begin reassembling the remote controller. We'll start with the rear housing. Install the gimbal dial, camera control dial, and C1 and C2 button control assembly into the rear housing. Make sure all 4 controls are positioned correctly, then secure the complete assembly with the 8 screws. Now move on to the front housing. Reinstall the power button and return home button into the front housing. Now install the power and control board. Position the board correctly inside the housing and secure it with the 4 screws. Install the speaker into its original position, secure it with the 2 screws, and reconnect the speaker cable. Next, reinstall the record button circuit board, position the button assembly correctly, secure it with the 2 screws, and reconnect the button cable. Install the camera button assembly in the same way. Secure it with the 2 screws and reconnect its cable. Reinstall the antenna module and secure it with the 2 screws. Next, reinstall the joystick modules. Remember that the left and right joystick modules are different, so make sure each module is installed on the correct side. Position the left joystick module in the housing, reconnect its cable, and secure the module with the 4 screws. Install the right joystick module in the same way. Reconnect the cable and secure the module with the 4 screws. Now, reinstall the main board. Carefully position the main board inside the front housing, and make sure it sits correctly in its original position. Reconnect all cables and antenna connectors to the main board. Work carefully and make sure every connector is fully seated before continuing. Do not force any connector into place. Take a moment to check the cable routing and compare it with the original layout. Make sure no flex cables, wires, or antenna cables are trapped underneath the main board or routed across screw holes or other components. secure the main board with the 4 screws. Now reinstall the metal heat spreading plate. Before installing the plate, check the thermal paste between the main board and the metal plate. If the existing thermal paste is still clean and properly positioned, it can be reused. If it is dry, dirty, or damaged, apply fresh thermal compound before installing the plate. Next, reinstall the cooling fan assembly. Position the fan assembly over the heat spreading plate and secure it with the 6 screws. Reconnect the fan connector to the main board. Install both battery cells into the controller housing and reconnect the battery connectors to the main board. Make sure the battery cables are routed underneath the battery cells as shown. If the cables are routed incorrectly, they may prevent the rear cover from closing properly or become pinched during reassembly. Before reinstalling the rear cover, make sure none of the cables interfere with the plastic clips or other parts of the housing. A trapped cable can prevent the case from closing and may damage the cable. Reconnect the rear cover cable to the main board, then align both halves of the controller housing and carefully press around the perimeter until all of the clips snap back into place. Reinstall the 2 hex screws behind the control stick storage slot, then reinstall the rubber stick holder. Finally, reinstall the 2 Phillips screws at the bottom of the controller. If you found this guide helpful, give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more tech tips and guides. Visit our website for more insights and do-it-yourself guides. Remember, every tech challenge is an opportunity to learn and grow. Thanks for watching How-FixIT, and we'll see you in the next one.